The moment I stopped mistaking silence for weakness. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I almost laughed. What could I possibly say after hearing my husband, the man who once kissed my forehead and called me his anchor, stand in open court and declare that he deserved to live off my fortune? People chuckled. Cameras clicked. And in that moment, something inside me cracked, not from humiliation, but from clarity. He'd been rehearsing this scene for years. I looked at him, the tailored suit, the polished shoes, the confident smirk. The same man who once promised to protect everything my father built. And all I felt was a quiet, burning calm. He thought he'd stripped me of power. He didn't notice the envelope resting on my lap. Inside wasn't revenge. It was truth, patient, documented, and far sharper than love had ever been. My name is Bernardine Lell, and that was the moment I stopped believing silence meant weakness. The courtroom. Boston family court smelled of old paper and burnt coffee. October sunlight sliced through the tall windows in thin, gray beams. The color seemed drained from the room, leaving only shadows and murmurs. I sat in the plaintiff's chair, fingers curled around the cream-colored envelope on my lap. Nobody met my eyes. They preferred the spectacle. Across the aisle, Charles stood, smooth, self-assured, the kind of man who could make a courtroom feel like a lecture hall. His smile was rehearsed, the one that used to convince me he understood loyalty and nuance. Now, it sounded like a coin dropped into a jar. Your Honor, he began, voice steady and polished. I believe I'm entitled to live comfortably off my wife's fortune. I supported her career for years. Murmurs rippled through the benches. A reporter adjusted his pen. Someone coughed. Charles looked at me then, his gaze saying everything his words didn't. Here I am. Clever, right? I let him have the moment. Let him perform. Judge Abrams watched us both. Her silver hair wound tightly, her face unreadable. Mrs. Lell, she said, would you like to speak? The question hung in the air like a dare. Not yet, Your Honor, I said. Silence deepened, until even the scratch of a pen sounded loud. The past. 3 years earlier, I met him at a financial law conference at the Boston Harbor Hotel, just weeks after my father's death. I was holding Lell Properties together through endless inheritance disputes when he appeared, calm, confident, knowing far too much. You're the one who restructured Lell's portfolio after your father passed, he said. That was bold. He knew every number, every clause in our trust, every fear I tried to hide behind spreadsheets. We talked until the staff dimmed the lights. For the first time in months, I felt seen. He sent flowers to my office the next morning for the woman who built her own empire. It wasn't romance. It was validation. And I mistook it for love. 3 months later, he came with a consulting contract to protect the company. He spoke with such precision, identifying the same weak points I'd confessed over wine. I signed. I thought I was securing my legacy. Later, I learned he'd once worked for the rival firm that tried to buy our largest property while my father was dying. I should have walked away. But when loneliness lingers long enough, even manipulation can feel like safety. The betrayal. After our wedding, he said he'd modernize everything, the house, the accounts, the future. I let him. Weeks later, a letter from the bank arrived. 22% of Lell Properties had been transferred to Grayline Ventures. I hadn't signed anything. You must have forgotten, sweetheart, he said, smiling. But I hadn't. I checked the file. My signature was perfect, too perfect. The metadata showed it was created 2 weeks after the recorded date. The law firm said it looked like a scanned image, not a real signature. And when I checked who uploaded the file, one name appeared. Charles Lell. He claimed he didn't remember. That night, I locked my office door, copied every file to a private USB, and realized the man I married wasn't protecting my legacy. He was rewriting it. The unraveling. I hadn't slept in days. His laughter from that last dinner party echoed in my head. After 2 weeks of silence, I called Marlene Ruiz, the most meticulous auditor I knew. Look into Grayline Ventures, I said. Be discreet. 3 days later, she sat across from me, eyes cold as glass. Bernardine, she said, Grayline's hollow. No employees, no payroll, no taxes, just transfers. Your money. How much? 2.7 million. Routed through 4 accounts, all leading back to Charles Lell 3. My throat closed. Marlene slid an email toward me. Prepare sale conditions once I control majority shares. Everything snapped into place. His talk of tax optimization, his calm logic, his endless charm. He wasn't managing our wealth. He was positioning himself to own it. I stared at my reflection on the laptop screen as I copied the files again. The woman looking back wasn't the one who confused manipulation with care. She was quiet, deliberate, and ready to fight. The party. A month later, he insisted on celebrating our 10th anniversary at the Fairmont Copley Plaza. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across the ballroom as he raised his glass. To my brilliant wife, he said, and to us, soon to be co-owners of Lell Properties. Applause filled the room. My pulse roared louder than the clinking glasses. Afterward, my father's old advisor, Harold Quinn, pulled me aside. Are you sure you know everything about Charles? Why? I asked. He hesitated, eyes flicking to the crowd. Because I represented his ex-wife 10 years ago, he said quietly. She lost everything. 10 years earlier, I'd represented his ex-wife. She walked away with nothing. He'd forged her signature on a trust document. When I got home, I pulled up the state archives. His name appeared beneath an old headline. Widow of real estate attorney accuses husband of fraudulent transfers, 2013. Same face, same smug smile. I label my USB files carefully. Evidence 1, gray line contract. Evidence 2, email thread. Evidence 3, 2013 article. If he could turn affection into a scheme, I could turn justice into a contract. On Monday morning, I stepped into Federal Plaza, a cream envelope clutched under my arm, thick with printed proofs. The air reeked of disinfectant and bureaucracy. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Elias, the federal investigator, sat behind a steel table, fingers laced, eyes sharp but calm, the kind of man who'd seen enough deceit to never look surprised. Mrs. Lowell, he said flatly, your husband's name has crossed my desk before. Not for fraud, advisory work. He's careful, but careful doesn't mean invincible. I slid the contract across. Elias adjusted his glasses, scrolled through the digital record, then pinched the bridge of his nose. See this? The metadata says created 6 months ago, edited 3 weeks ago. Not 2021, like the signature line claims. Can we use it? I asked. Not yet, he replied. He has to submit it in court himself. That's when intent becomes evidence. A shiver traced my spine. Justice, it seemed, required bait. Days later, Elias returned with another folder. He's filed for divorce, irreconcilable differences. He's referencing a prenup he says you never signed. He's confident. Then he hit play on a recovered email. Once the filing's in, she won't have time to stop the liquidation. Elias looked up. Will you let him think he's winning? I pictured a child in the plaza outside, steadying his parents' hand as they tried to balance on a bike. He always loved the sound of his own voice, I said softly. I'll give him a stage. Back at Lowell Properties, I opened my father's old safe. Inside was a velvet-wrapped USB and a note in his handwriting. Backup agreements do not alter. My chest tightened. I plugged it in. The files were immaculate. Original partnership documents from 2019 to 2022, complete with untouched metadata. In one file, the log read, edited by Charles L., legal, modified February 3rd, 2023. I sent an encrypted copy to Elias. That night, he called Voice Electric. We've got him. The signature hash is from software that didn't even exist before 2023. That's digital gold. He instructed me to play weak. He needs to believe you're unprepared. Let him step into his own trap. 3 days later, Charles arrived with a heavy binder. I've decided to file, Bernie, he said smoothly, setting it down. You'll thank me later. This will be clean. Already gathered your evidence. I asked. Of course, he smiled, that same polished arrogance. When he left, I slid a fresh envelope into my desk drawer. Inside were the forensic reports, metadata, and FBI verification. On the front, I wrote, for Judge Abrams to be opened at the right moment. Monday morning, Boston wore a shroud of gray drizzle. Rain whispered across the courthouse steps. Inside, the courtroom overflowed, reporters, spectators, quiet murmurs rising like steam. I sat in the front row, cream envelope resting in my lap, pulse steady. Sometimes justice doesn't shout. Sometimes it waits. Charles walked in radiating false confidence, tailored gray suit, crimson tie, the air of a man mistaking deceit for charm. Cameras flashed as he smiled like a conqueror returning home. His attorney rose. "Your Honor," he began, smooth and rehearsed. "My client has been a devoted husband and advisor. We will prove that Mrs. Lowell never signed the prenuptial agreement. Therefore, all assets must be divided equally." Judge Abrams gave a slow nod. "Proceed." Charles stood, savoring the sound of his own name, ready to deliver the performance he'd rehearsed for years. "For years," he began, "I stood by my wife as she managed her late father's company. Everything she owns, the house, the wealth, the legacy, came from him. I was the one who gave her stability, reputation, companionship. Now, I only ask to live comfortably from what we built together." A ripple of restrained laughter moved through the courtroom. Cameras clicked like distant thunder. He turned toward me, a glint of triumph in his eyes. "Bernardine, you owe me that much, don't you?" I didn't flinch. Watching him was like replaying a film where the villain still believes he can change the ending. Then, with deliberate flair, he lifted a thick binder. "Your Honor, I have the original agreement right here." He handed it over with a showman's flourish. Judge Abrams adjusted her glasses, flipping through the pages. Her brows knit slowly together. From the back of the courtroom, I caught Elias's steady gaze. He gave one small, knowing nod. It was time. "Your Honor," I said, rising. "May I approach the bench?" "You may." I placed my envelope beside Charles's binder. "I'd like the court to verify the date and composition of the ink used in Mr. Lowell's documents." A low murmur spread through the gallery. Judge Abrams's eyebrow arched. "Go on." "The digital pen used for his signature," I said clearly, "wasn't released until 2023. The contract he presented is dated 2021. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. The judge glanced at the forensic report I'd provided. The FBI's seal gleamed faintly in the light. She read for a few seconds, and then, unexpectedly, she laughed. A bright, genuine sound that echoed through the courtroom. "Mr. Lowell," she said with a smile that held both pity and amusement, "you're asking this court to believe you signed a document 2 years before the pen you used even existed?" Charles went rigid, color draining from his face. That's impossible. She forged it. She set me up." Judge Abrams lowered her glasses, voice calm and cool. "No, Mr. Lowell, you set yourself up." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Charles slammed his palm on the table, the sound hollow and panicked. 2 bailiffs moved in before he could speak again. I looked at him one last time, my voice barely a whisper. "I told you once, Charles, silence can be powerful." Sunlight poured through the tall windows, catching on the edges of the open envelope. For the first time, justice felt real, not abstract or distant, but solid, breathing mine. When the gavel struck, the room fractured into chaos. Voices rose, cameras flashed, polished shoes scraped across marble. 2 officers took Charles by the arms, guiding him toward the side door. He didn't fight. He only stared at the floor, gray hair stark beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. For a man who once believed silence meant surrender, he finally understood what it could destroy. Reporters called his name, shouting questions, but I stayed seated. I wasn't watching him leave. I was watching the shadow of who I used to be disappear with him. Through the crowd, Elias emerged, calm as always. He handed me a folded document stamped with a federal seal. "The FBI will charge him with forgery, fraud, and attempted asset misappropriation," he said. "It's over." I nodded. "Will they find others?" He exhaled quietly. "They already did. 2 other women. Same pattern. He'll be facing federal time." A long breath left me, not victory, not vengeance, but release. From the open window drifted the scent of rain on stone, the clean air that follows a storm. Judge Abrams's voice rose again, clear above the noise. All marital asset claims from Mr. Lell are dismissed. Mrs. Lell retains full ownership of Lell properties. The court awards damages for legal and emotional distress. 3 firm strikes of the gavel followed. Crisp, final, pure. The sound of closure. As the guards escorted Charles out, reporters turned their lenses toward me. "Mrs. Lell," one called out, "how does it feel to win?" I looked directly into the cameras. "It doesn't feel like winning," I said quietly. "It feels like correcting a mistake that should never have existed." For a moment, there was only stillness, no shouts, no flashes. Then the noise returned, but I had already turned away. Outside, beneath the courthouse archway, Marlene Ruiz waited, her coat buttoned tight against the wind. When she saw me, she smiled. "You really did it," she said. I shook my head. "No, the truth did." She tilted her head, eyes soft. "And that's what makes it beautiful." A black car pulled up, quiet and waiting. I stepped inside. The door closed with a soft, final thud, the sound of an ending finally earned. As we drove through Beacon Hill, sunlight spilled between the thinning clouds, painting the brownstones in molten gold. For the first time in years, Boston seemed to breathe again. I turned toward the window, watching the faint reflection of the woman looking back at me. She wasn't the wife who once avoided conflict, nor the daughter who lived to uphold a family's illusion. Her eyes were calm now, clear, unflinching. Outside, the city blurred into motion, the courthouse shrinking behind me until it became no more than a distant outline, a chapter closing. I traced the edge of the envelope resting in my lap, the same one that had once shaken in my hands. Justice, I realized, never shouts. It whispers. And today I finally listened. 6 months later, Boston felt reborn. Quieter, lighter. My new office at the Lell Foundation for Financial Truth smelled of fresh paint and purpose. The walls glowed as soft cream beneath the winter light spilling through wide windows that overlooked the public garden. For the first time in my life, there was no one left who could deceive me. A single envelope sat on my desk, white, thin, written in handwriting I would have known anywhere. Charles's penmanship was as disciplined as ever. Careful loops, perfect lines, the arrogance of control even in ink. I stared at it for a long time before breaking the seal. "Bernardine, I only wanted to live off your fortune." "Charles, no excuses, no defense, just a single sentence of truth, stripped bare." I smiled, not with bitterness, but something gentler. Pity, perhaps. After all this time, he had finally been honest. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the top drawer beside my wedding ring, the same band I'd removed the night his lies became undeniable. "Well," I murmured, closing the drawer softly, "I suppose now you're living off my taxes." Outside, church bells chimed, their sound drifting over the common. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the glass, brushing over a framed photograph on the wall. My father and me, standing before the old Lell property sign, the day we cut the ribbon. His hand was on my shoulder, his eyes proud, certain. He used to tell me, wealth means responsibility. For years, I thought he was talking about money, but now I understood he meant truth. Because wealth born of deceit is never truly yours to keep. And justice, once earned, has its own quiet gravity. I turned back to my desk. My laptop hummed softly, a new case glowing on the screen. Client, Claire Morton, 49, Maine. Issue, husband transferred farmland into his sole name before filing for divorce. I read the summary slowly, feeling not anger, but focus. Purpose. "All right," I whispered, clicking open the folder. "Let's begin." The office was still except for the steady ticking of the clock, blending with the faint rhythm of the city below. Laughter, a trolley bell, footsteps fading down the street. Life continued, indifferent yet somehow lighter. I picked up a pen and began writing notes along the margin. Precise, deliberate, the way I once built my own case. Line by line, until the truth had nowhere left to hide. When I finally paused, the sun had shifted. A slant of gold fell across my desk, catching on the edge of another envelope. The same cream shade that had once rested on a courtroom bench. I didn't move it. I only watched, the way one observes something sacred. Because justice, I've learned, doesn't announce itself. It doesn't thunder or demand applause. It waits, quietly, patiently, for the moment when it's finally seen. And sometimes it takes the simple form of a small envelope, silent, unassuming, yet bright enough to outshine everything that once tried to bury the truth.